Story 1. Am I the a-hole for telling my son he deserved his girlfriend breaking up with him? So, my son had a long-distance girlfriend for about 2 years. She was great, a really nice girl, and we all loved her and welcomed her with open arms. She was flying here constantly to visit him, like a weekend a month, and he didn't lift a finger to go visit her. I tried talking to him about it several times and told him he should really start looking into flying over to her instead of expecting her to do all the traveling. He said no, and my wife probably had something to do with it, as she constantly told him she was afraid of him flying. I spoke to them both and said this girl is great for him. She was willing to move over to our country too, but said there was one condition, and that was he'd have to fly over to her country too, which is fair enough. He said no, he didn't want to fly or travel anywhere. My son was becoming lazier and lazier, eventually telling his girlfriend and us that he was perfectly fine never traveling anywhere, including holidays, etc. Last week he told us she dumped him. I went on her Facebook page, as we're all still friends. She wrote us an apology letter about how she's upset it didn't work out, but these things happen, so we're on good terms. And looks like she's with a new guy already. Me and my wife have no doubt she was seeing him whilst still in a relationship with my son. I confessed to them both that I actually agree with her decision, and she should have expected it. He did not treat her properly, and I hope he learns lessons for the next one because he needs to make more of an effort. I said he deserved it for his lack of effort in the relationship and for essentially just allowing this girl to spend all her money and time coming here all the time. Wife and son are very upset I said this, very, very upset, and my wife says I'm being horrible. Am I the a-hole? I stand by what I said. All right, jury. We'll have to leave it up to you for the final verdict. Yeah, we're going judge style with this, I guess. I don't know. I've just decided that. But so we have a person. You're dishing out some pretty cold truths here. Like, it is true that it is kind of your son's fault here. Your son didn't make efforts, and relationships are oftentimes about compromise and finding balance. Each person needs to be giving and receiving, and there are going to be some things that it's like, hey, for this relationship to work, this is something that I need from you. And if the other person's not willing to give it, well, then it's up to them, you know. The ball is in his court, and he did not return the serve. Now, the way that you presented and all that stuff, no, I mean, I 100% agree. I'm not saying that it's not an a-hole thing to do. That might be a bit of an a-hole move, but I think it's an a-hole move that your son kind of needed to hear. Your son was, being lazy, not putting in effort to a relationship. You've got to be willing to put in some effort. And while we can't judge your son on a whole, I'd say at least in this regard, he screwed up, and hopefully it's a lesson learned, and hopefully your harsh truth gets through to him, even if you might be an a-hole for saying it. Story 2. Don't announce your engagement at someone else's wedding, or this might just happen to you. Last summer, I was at a cousin's wedding. His bride and her family had been close with ours since before I was born, and the couple had known each other since they were toddlers, so it was a particularly exciting event for both sides of the family. However, after the ceremony was over and the party had only just started, one of the bridesmaids decided to announce her own engagement. The attention was immediately taken away from newlyweds and brought to the bridesmaid, who I'll call Sarah, and her equally smug fiancé. My cousin's wife, I'll call her Emma, didn't make a scene or utter a single negative word about Sarah. She looked like she was on the verge of tears, but she kept grinning and acted very happy for the other couple. This was unusual, as Emma is typically quite confrontational and speaks her mind no matter the consequences. Sarah later picked Emma to be the maid of honor at her own wedding, which took place last weekend. I wasn't there for it, but my cousin sent me some of the best bits on Snapchat and explained the whole situation. This is where the fun begins. Emma's two much younger sisters were the flower girls at Sarah's wedding. At the very last moment, Emma switched out the white petals in their baskets to blue ones she had secretly brought with her. She told her sisters not to say anything about it or let the bride see them until it was time to scatter them down the aisle. Sarah looked very confused upon seeing the blue petals, which didn't coordinate whatsoever with her theme, but of course she didn't say anything about it in the moment. Most of Sarah's other bridesmaids were also Emma's friends, had attended Emma's wedding, and were in on Emma's scheme. At the reception, Emma's sisters and the other bridesmaids were tight-lipped when Sarah began demanding to know why there were blue petals. The wedding planner ended up getting a lot of abuse for not checking the flower girls' baskets before they walked down the aisle. Finally, it was time for the speeches. The speeches took place in front of a massive screen displaying a loop of photos with Sarah and her husband, which had been compiled by Emma. Emma took the remote that controlled the presentation screen, and at first she showed some pre-approved humorous photos of Sarah with Emma and other friends to facilitate a couple light-hearted jokes. Then, at the very end, Emma said to Sarah that she must be wondering why there were blue petals instead of the white ones originally planned. That was when Emma displayed the last slide from her presentation. Emma announced in front of everyone that she was 5 months pregnant and that she just discovered the baby was a boy, hence the blue petals. The last slide, her ultrasound picture. There were shocked yells and gasps. Sarah had a fit, but those involved in the scheme cheered so loudly that I sincerely regret watching the Snapchat recording with headphones. Apparently, Sarah had been very nasty to her bridesmaids before, driving several of them away and forcing the others to pay ridiculous amounts of money for dresses. Emma and my cousin were eventually thrown out of the party, but they were all smiles. Sarah's fuming mother went to confront her outside, and Emma retorted with, "Gentle, gentle, I'm pregnant." I reckon Sarah doesn't speak to the majority of those bridesmaids anymore. Too long didn't read. Self-important bridesmaid announces her engagement at my cousin's wedding, stealing the spotlight from her and his bride. Said bridesmaid foolishly names my cousin's wife her maid of honor and behaves like a complete bridezilla. Cousin's wife sabotages her wedding to announce her own pregnancy. Now, I was going to say that this sounds like a situation that should have maybe been discussed in private instead of concocting a malicious revenge scheme, because in general, maybe not the best. Just communication and being like, hey, I know that your engagement was really important to you, but announcing it during my wedding reception really detracted from what the day was about. And and this is coming from a guy who doesn't think weddings are all that big of a deal, but I respect that other people do believe that, and I would never pull something like this. But hearing that Sarah was a bit of a bridezilla and did the thing that I hate, where a bride's just like, you're going to be my wedding party and you're going to have to spend a lot of money because it's my big day. It's like, no, if you want your big day, you pay for big things. Don't push that off onto your friends. It's not that important. See, this is where the whole I don't think weddings are that important part comes out. But no, it sounds like Sarah kind of had this coming, especially if a number of the bridesmaids were all on board with this. So, again, I'm going to have to say, it is still a bit of an a-hole move because it's also ruining the wedding for well, not ruining the wedding. It's not ruining the wedding. You know what? Whatever. You do you. I think it's fine. Story 3. We're having a 6th kid we can't afford, so we expect you to give us your college fund. I am a 19 female, my parents' second child. I have 3 brothers, 21, 13, and 7, and a sister, 16. We grew up poor, but parents were often dependent on financial help from relatives, friends, etc. for raising us. This is because even though my dad has a mediocre job and my mom doesn't work, they just kept on popping out one kid after another. My parents are very religious and believe that children are a gift from God. Personally, I think that's total BS. My parents' reproductive choices wouldn't bother me if it hadn't caused mine and my siblings' lives to turn to crap. While growing up, we never had new clothes or toys. We had to accept handouts from family members who were better off. We never went out or did anything fun. To top it off, we were well aware that the rest of the family looked down on us for constantly asking for handouts. Now, my older brother and I have managed to get into good colleges and are looking forward to a future that would be better than our parents' lives. He and I were staying at our parents' place for a while due to COVID-19 lockdown. One morning, my parents called all 5 of us into the living room. My mom said she had great news. The smile that was forming on my face died a quick death when she said, "We're pregnant." I lost my temper. I asked them how they could be so stupid and irresponsible. Do they not have enough financial troubles already that they have to bring in another mouth to feed? My older brother tried to calm me down, but I was livid. After a lifetime of scarcity because of my parents' stupidity, they still hadn't learned their lesson. I asked them how they planned to provide for the kid. My dad told me I would have to give up the money our great uncle had left me. He had left all 5 of us some money, which only we could access when we turned 19. I said, hell no! That money would help pay for my college expenses. He called me selfish for not being there for my family. I told them if they couldn't provide for the kid, they should get an abortion. My mom started crying and called me a heartless monster. Dad told me he was disgusted with me. I told them there is no way I'm going to pay for their stupidity, and the only thing I would be willing to pay for is a termination. What I was really worried about was my siblings' lives getting even worse. My older brother and I have escaped our parents' clutches, but the others, especially my younger sister, will be expected to help take care of this baby. No teenager deserves to have their adolescence ruined by diapers and a screaming baby. I know what it's like, as I had to go through that. It was expected of me to be an unpaid nanny to my younger brother and sister. My older brother could go out with his friends and have fun, but I had to stay home and help give baths and feed the toddlers. I decided to get some family members involved so they could talk some sense into my parents. I called my mom's maternal cousin. She is one of my favorite people. When I told her that my mom and dad were having another kid, she reacted with, "What? Again?" I told her everything and how they expected me to hand over my inheritance. She said she was going to speak to my parents and told me not to sign over anything. I promised her I wouldn't. Of course I wouldn't. I also called 2 of my first cousins, one of whom is an accountant, so she could explain to my parents how much of a financial liability this baby is going to be and try to convince them to either abort or give it up for adoption. I moved out of my parents' home a few days ago. I was only going to stay there till the lockdown was relaxed, but I just can't bear to listen to my mom's nagging about how this baby is a blessing and that I want to kill it. I've moved into a friend's basement for a minimal rent. My mom's cousin paid them a visit about a week ago and tried to tell them they weren't doing this child any favors by bringing it into a life of poverty. My mom was very rude to my aunt and told her that a woman who chooses to remain barren will never understand a mother's love. My aunt never wanted kids nor had any, one of the reasons she's my fave. My dad told her to get out. Aunt told me there was nothing she could do, but she did try. I didn't blame her. My cousin tried to explain the economic impact this kid would have, and my mom cried about how everyone was trying to take away her baby. What the F? The intervention didn't do crap, so now I've decided to cut contact with my parents. I just can't watch my family slide further and further into a hellhole. I'll be maintaining contact with my sister, 16, just to make sure my parents can't brainwash her. My older brother is going to stay in touch with all of them, which is a good thing as he can act as a link between me and the other siblings if my parents ever forbid them from talking to me. Otherwise, I'm done with these people. Edit. I want to thank you all for your kind and supportive comments and for the awards as well. Look, I occasionally get comments and stuff that I'm a little too harsh with people when I'm just like, don't have the baby, give the baby up. And they're like, but you don't understand how much a parent loves a baby because you don't have kids and everything. And admittedly, yeah, I don't. I do not have that experience. But I do know that if you're going to be a parent, it is a responsibility that you're taking on. You are being responsible for that life and saying, I'm going to, provide for them and make sure they're happy and stuff. And when you have that many kids already, and there are so many people in the world waiting to adopt and give kids great lives and stuff, to selfishly hang on to a kid and everything and to, make that kid's life, rough and your other kids' lives worse because you just can't afford to do that. I mean, I can't say that a parent shouldn't do that and shouldn't try to figure out a way to make it work. If you really love a kid, go for it, I guess. But seriously, you need to consider that stuff. You need to consider the responsibility you have to this kid and how your decision is going to affect them. Because if it is just going to be a burden on everyone's life, adoption is a wonderful thing. There are so many people out there who wish they could have kids. There are people on waiting lists for years who wish that they could give a kid an amazing life. And it's heartbreaking, and it's hard for these parents. I couldn't even imagine how hard it would be for this mom to do that. But if you really love the kid, it could be for the best. And I don't want to say this mom should get an abortion if she doesn't believe in it. I believe in abortion, but if she doesn't, that is her call to make. It's her body. But adoption should I don't know. Think of the kids and everything. That's all I got. I guess. I don't know. Have a great day, everyone.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.